Greetings, comrades. I'm here to do a video today, and I'm going to change some things that I do. I was over watching a video over at Richard Reed's. I'll link his channel down below. He was talking about how he doesn't like doing reviews. I don't feel comfortable doing them either. I'm not an English major. I'm not a trained critic. I don't mind talking about books that I've read and I enjoy. Of course, I love that. That's why we do these videos. But I always feel odd calling it a review. So I'm going to do something instead called Wraps and Racks, which is wrap-ups of what I'm reading and recommendations or to either read or not read certain books. So it's just a little bit more informal and not quite so weighty as a review. So let's get started. I'm going to do 3 books today, 2 of which I read the first couple of weeks this year. And they're all very similar, so I kind of wanted to do them together. So it's a bit of a wrap-up for these books. The first one is called Mrs. Aris Goes to Paris. Now, when I saw this, and I saw this over on Tanya's channel, List Obsessed Reader is what it's called. I'll put a link to hers down below. With this title, her name is obviously Harris. There's an apostrophe in front of the A, so the H has been dropped. The title alone tells you something. This is obviously a woman who's British and working class. And what a British working class woman is doing going to Paris is up to the imagination. We'll have to read it to find out. But with that kind of title, I was very intrigued, and so I read about the book, and it is about actually a English charwoman, which is a cleaning lady, to those of us in the U.S. is what we would call it. In one of her clients, in her closet one day, she sees a couple of Dior dresses, and she falls in love. And she's determined to have a Dior dress, so she scrimps and she saves and she wins a little bit of money, and she decides to go to Paris to have this Dior dress. And it takes like 3 years for her to get the money together, but she's determined, right? So she goes, and of course it's nothing like what she thinks. She thinks she's going to go there, she goes to Dior, she goes in the store, she finds a dress she likes, she buys it, and she comes home. And it doesn't work that way, okay? You have to have an invitation, you get shown the collection, they make you your dress. She wasn't prepared for any of that. But it is a charming story. The characters in here are, for the most part, all very good. They're very appealing characters. The author has written some other books. He wrote Snow Goose and Thomasina, fairy tale stories, books he's written on fairy tales. And this book is also a fairy tale. It has some conflict in it. When she gets there, things aren't what she thinks they're going to be. So there's a bit of a conflict there with her trying to get her dress and them like looking at her dressed in her cleaning lady affordable clothes, and so there's a little bit of chaos ensuing there, but it's good timing. She brings luck to the people that she runs into there, and it ends up being a very charming story, and in a way it seems to me to be a kind of homage to charwomen that the author has written, that obviously someone who one or more held a place that was dear to his heart. It's not realistic, it's a fairy tale, but it's not you know, there's no like magic or things like that in it. It's just probably not very probable, so to speak. So anyway, I'm giving this 4 stars, and I'm really glad I saw this over on Tanya's. I think I saw it on her Goodread page, actually. So check it out. It's a very small book. You can see it's very narrow. It's only got about 150-something pages in it, I think, so it'll be a quick read. And I just found it charming and delightful. It was a really sweet story, nice anecdote for a lot of stuff that you read today, and so I really liked it, and I definitely recommend it. It's definitely a favorite of mine, so thanks, Tanya. I'm really glad you put this up. The second book I want to recommend, and Tanya mentioned this also, it was already on my radar and my list for a while, is Miss Pettigrew Lives for a Day. Yeah, Paul Gallico, Gallico, wrote this book. And this is by Winifred Watson. And this, in a sense, is very similar. It's about a working class woman. This book takes place, Mrs. Aris Goes to Paris takes place in like the 50s. This takes place in the 30s, and it's about a woman who is kind of on her last stand. She's like one step away from having to go to the workhouse because she she's behind in her rent, and her room rent is all she can afford, a room, and she hasn't been able to find a job. She's a governess. She's probably not really a very good governess. It doesn't suit her. It's not what she really wants to do. It's just kind of what she ended up doing. It takes place in the 30s, which of course was during the Depression, also in England. It doesn't go a whole lot into the fact that there's a depression. It doesn't talk about World War I or the looming World War II or anything like that. And she's a woman who can't find work, and she can't seem to keep a job, and so she's down on her luck, and she doesn't have much money left, and she's definitely in dire straits. She goes to this job interview, and it turns out that the job place had mixed up the interviews. They sent her to the one that was supposed to get a maid, and someone else to the one who wanted a governess. Well, it turns out when she gets there, the woman, when she arrives, the woman thinks that she's come for the maid's job. So she just kind of takes her into her whirlwind life from there. And the story is told in like 24 hours, and the chapters are different time periods. And she kind of tries to tell the woman that, you know, she actually came for the governess job, and, you know, where are the children? And this woman is one of the bright young things. She's trying to be on the stage. She's been on the stage, you know, and she has these boyfriends that are, you know, questionable, some of them, to say the least. And so there's all kinds of stuff going on during this one day. As they get ready, they go out here to this party, and then they go out later on where she sings at a nightclub, and all of the little foibles and stuff. To some extent now, this is going to look kind of stereotyped as far as the nightclub scenes and things like that. But this was written in the 30s. It was pretty new back then. It's kind of still the people that she ends up being involved with and her friends are kind of still like jazz age types in a sense, you know, and she was like a minister's or vicar's, some clergyman type person's daughter, and grew up in a very strict home and never had much affection and certainly never had any fun, and you know, has just kind of been struggling to survive. She's like, what, in her 40s, I think, or 40 or in her 40s, something like that. But she's pretty beaten down. So she just determines when she gets to this place and gets kind of mistaken for something else and gets caught up in that she's just going to, for this one day, she's just going to be whatever they want her to be and do what they want her to do. And she ends up in a way kind of like Mrs. Harris, coming up with ways to solve the problems that this woman has and her friend has, and with their romances and things like that. And it ends up being just a really delightful story. I can't recommend it enough. Miss Pettigrew lives for a day. She gets thrown completely into a different world than what she's used to. And to see how she reacts, it's not a farce by any stretch of the imagination, but it is comical, it is humorous, but it's also endearing and sweet. And you're just really rooting for her to, like, you know, come on and be a part of this wild stage, nightclub, movie people world, okay? So anyway, I highly recommend this. This gets 4 stars. Put it on your list. Now, the next book I want to talk about, hopefully I have time here, is a book, I don't know where my copy is. A lot of my books are packed away, so I don't have it. It's called Miss Bunkle's Book, B-U-N-C-L-E''S. And it's by an author named D.E. Stevenson. And she wrote books, she's English, and she wrote books back in the 30s also. And this is a book that is in a way similar to these other two. It's about a woman. Her name is Barbara Bunkle. She lives in a small village somewhere in England. And it's in the 30s, and money's getting kind of, she's like running out of money. She has one person who like cooks and cleans for her, but who basically just works to have a place to live, because she doesn't really have a lot of money, and what she has is running out. So she decides that in order to make some money, she will write a book. So she writes this book about the people in her village, right? Right what you know. But she hardly changes anything. She just writes everything exactly as it is. Now, she knows enough to know that she should change their names, but she changes things from like silver to gold, east to west, things like that. So it's really obvious to anyone who's going to read this that what it is. Well, she sends the book off, and the people at the publishers, they don't know if it's like a bad novel or a great satire, but they decide to publish it anyway. And it becomes a big hit. And so when she's writing about the people in the village, she kind of makes up her own resolutions for what happens in their lives at the end of the book. But otherwise, she just talks about them the way they are. She just writes down what actually is. So eventually, of course, the people in the village learn about this book because it becomes very popular, and it's really obvious that it's about them, and chaos ensues. They are going nuts, and they're trying to figure out who it is that wrote the book, except nobody suspects her, because she's kind of this, not mousy, but she's very quiet. She's kind of a non-entity in the town. You know, she's got a couple of friends, and she's nice, but she's not one of the movers and shakers, and so nobody even considers that it's her that wrote this book. But it's kind of like it's not a romp, but it is a humorous book, and I have, there's a couple of follow-ups to it as well. I've read the first one, and I enjoyed it as well, but this one I really was just a lot of fun. So it's in the same kind of vein as the others. Take a woman, working class, middle class. This woman wasn't really a working class. I think she came from, like, you know, people who weren't tradespeople or job people or things, but you know, her family's gone and she doesn't have anyone, and the money's gone, and she's falling on hard times. So I don't know, I still get kind of confused about the division of class in Britain, even though with all the books I read, but she wasn't a tradesperson, I know that. So anyway, they're all three very similar. They're all three about women who are kind of struggling in a way, and you know, need to have some earn money or whatever. Mrs. Eyre's book is a little bit different, but they're delightful, they're charming. I definitely recommend it. I will try and put links to them down below on Amazon if I can, but definitely check them out. Miss Pettigrew is pretty well known. The other two not so much so, but they're definitely worth checking out. So anyway, that's my wrap up for the first week of, which is now is already, we're into the past the into the third week, I know. But that's a bit of a wrap-up for my first week of reading for January, so I hope you liked it. And Raps and Recs, that's going to be the new thing now in review. So that's it for now. Happy reading and happy trails.